So if you guys could start, maybe some of you can kind of let us know, when was the time when you felt, most isolated by the Muslim community? What was an experience you had where you just felt very alone, having engaged the Muslim community, and you were left kind of in this place where it was like, I didn't know Muslims did this to Muslims?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, definitely, most definitely. One of the things that happened to me, like from, I would say, when I was still in high school, like I said, even though I became Muslim in high school, I became Muslim in the 9th grade, I wasn't very religious. So I was kind of like a knucklehead, and there was 3 things that I never thought I would be able to give up, ever. Women, weed, and partying. And that was like a real big struggle for me. And like I would say from like 2000 to 2003, Allah gave me the strength and the courage to give up those things, right? But what ended up happening is that I had gotten involved into a particular community, the Salafi community particularly, and I remember that I changed in a lot of good ways, and then I also changed in a lot of negative ways. And when I started to realize that, kind of like many of the negative things that they basically almost like possessing me, and I would like name call people like heretic and innovator and all this type of stuff, and I was just swept up in this whole movement of making people feel less because they don't agree with your views. And Allah had to, but He did. Allah humbled me to a great extent, and I'm grateful for that because it made me reflect on how wrong I was. And when I began to realize that and I began to change for the better, people who were in my circles, they began to turn their backs on me because I stopped being that person who was the name caller, who was saying, oh, you're not good enough because of this, you're not good enough because of that. And there were a lot of things, other things that happened, like, for example, like I said, my name is Gareth Bryant, right? And I didn't change my name when I became Muslim. And when I learned that as long as your name doesn't have a negative meaning, there's no need for you to change it, I expressed that deeply among people, and I received a lot of resentment for it. I remember when I first became Muslim, the whole thing about like wearing a kufi and a thobe and shawakamis, all this type of stuff. I would wear it sometimes, not wear it sometimes, and I came to the decision that I'm not going to wear those things anymore because it's not Islamically required. When I started to do that, people, like I said, people in my inner circle would like say things like I'm a deviant or I'm an innovator, to the extent where there was a brother in a particular community who actually encouraged people to not send taslim upon me when they see me, or to give me the cold shoulder when they see me. And to the extent where I remember it was a Jummah khutbah, and this brother, he gave a khutbah called the Etiquettes of the Masjid. And one of the things he said that whenever a person comes to the masjid, they shouldn't dress like they're going to a party, right? So this person basically gave the impression that if you're not dressing like this, the way you're dressing is not Islamically valid, or you're automatically doing something that's obscene or haram. And I remember looking at people, and they looked directly at me because I was the only person who didn't have a thobe, who didn't have a kufi, and that was further how should I say, resentment that people felt towards me. So I have a lot of personal experience with people like basically boycotting you or treating you bad, and that really hurt the most because non-Muslims had never treated me that way, but Muslims did. So that makes me like extra sensitive to never, how should I say, be foolish enough to condemn someone because of whatever their level of religiosity is, because true guidance comes from Allah and not ourselves. And all of us have flaws, all of us have faults, just like the Prophet he said, all of the sons of Adam are sinful, and the best of the sinful are those who make repentance. And that really sticks with me. And also what he said is that the Muslim is one who protects the people from his negative statements and actions. And a lot of times we oppress people with our ignorance, and we also oppress people with our knowledge. So I always try my best to protect people from my negative statements and my negative actions, and I hope that everyone else can do the same.
Anybody else want to answer this question?
About isolation?
Yeah, Fadl.
So like I said, I converted to Islam in 2006, and in 2006 I walked away from Islam because I remember feeling this deep, deep sense of isolation and not understanding what was going on with me. I mean, I had found religion, and so many of my problems were supposed to be solved, and yet, you know, I mean, what I experienced, you probably, if you haven't heard it, you might hear it from some other panel members, but the things that new Muslims go through, I'll let other people touch on it, but it basically just got to the point where I sought out the advice of a sheikh, you know, a bona fide sheikh. He studied, and I won't say where, and I won't say where I spoke to him, but I told him, I said, Sheikh, I'm so sad. What do I do? And right after yelling at someone for sleeping in the masjid, he turned to me and he said, sadness is the result of sinful action. So I said, forget that. Right? I said, you know, forget this.
That's not what you said.
How are you going to call me out like that, man? Oh. No, but I mean, what did I leave my life for? You know, why did I leave friends and a support network for this? To be told that I'm a sinner before I'm even told, you know, anything of relative use. I mean, the first week, I mean, at first, you know, when you're a brand new Muslim, you're like, you know, people say you're like a newborn baby. You're impressionable, perhaps in the same way. So I took what people said to heart, naturally. I mean, they were Muslim. They would know what they were talking about, right? And when I was told that I was, you know, I had just converted, I was having trouble waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to pray Fajr, and when I was told that I was sinful, then, you know, naturally I believed it. So, like Garrett said, I mean, information, knowledge, rather, becomes a burden on people if you don't have the wisdom in knowing when to dispense it. So people overburdened me. I mean, people didn't talk to me so much as they gave me piles and piles of books, pamphlets that were in really poor English and just like, and this I had traded for, you know, the homily, which you know, I found spiritually very moving. And anyway, I'll just wrap it up by saying a lot of the ideas espoused in these books were really crazy. I mean, they were not common sense at all. And when people would come into my room and say, hey, I heard you became Muslim, what's this? They'd say, oh. It actually ended some friendships, I mean, right then and there. So
just to also, you know, I'm going to try not to interject, but I talk a lot. As much as it creates an opportunity for us to, you know, find laughter and kind of that understanding when somebody's talking, and I'm not saying for people not to laugh, you definitely should. This is something he actually went through, and that's what I want you to focus on, right? When he's trying to learn Islam, people threw stacks of books at him that he couldn't really kind of get through. That was his pathway into the deen. So as much as it puts us in a place where we're like, yeah, we can relate to the pamphlets that, you know, have no sensibility and they're English and they're an archaic language, whatever, right? This guy, Jonathan, you know, Allah preserve him, was a great man. We didn't help educate him. Like, we made those pamphlets, we wrote those books, and we translated them, and we never thought from the perspective, maybe there's going to be a young white guy from Boston who's going to read this one day.
Boston.
Massachusetts, whatever.
Yes, thank you.
We could do a New York City roll call so that Massachusetts is totally blown out the water. But we won't do that. But that's what I'm saying, right? Like, as we go through this, like, listen to what's being said and, like, actually listen to it. You know, that was his path to education. And that's really bad of us. And we have to start thinking about those things. You want to say something, Will, on this question?
Yeah. I almost feel bad. I have a feeling most people didn't know that this is what they were getting into when they came. So my apologies in advance. But I think Yahya is exactly right when he said that new converts are like babies. Because in terms of what we understand and what we're susceptible to, that's exactly right. We sort of absorb everything. What's said and what's left unsaid, what's done subconsciously. So when it comes to very overt actions, that's compounded 10 or 100-fold, who knows. But for me, I felt alienated within 2 weeks of converting. So when I got cut off from them, that was a big deal. And the reason I got cut off is it became apparent very quickly that the guy who was sort of taking the lead and teaching me how to pray, teaching me some basic Arabic, it became clear that he was interested in more than a friendship, more than a student-teacher relationship. And when I sort of tried to push back on that, and he wouldn't accept that, what ended up happening is he sort of poisoned the well for me. MashaAllah, my friends were very supportive. But in terms of understanding what I had just done in converting to Islam, there was no one there who was capable of understanding. And the point of me telling you this is that set the trajectory for the next 2 to 3 years of my life. The reason I stayed, I guess I could say, the reason I decided to remain Muslim was almost out of resentment for the people who didn't help me. It wasn't until I came here to NYU that I actually found a healthy community and started to sort of rehabilitate my relationship with Islam from one that was motivated by resentment and anger to one that was actually based on healthy relationships with people. The role models that I met here completely changed the course of my life. And if there's one thing I could say to all of you and to everybody on this panel, it would be that role models are so important to someone who is in every sense regarding the deen, a baby. We need to absorb all of the positive energy that we can. And so having a community that provides that is absolutely important, because I can tell you that it can ruin your life for quite a long time if you don't have that. So, thank you.
So, Jay and then Peter, and then we'll kind of move on in the discussion.
I think one of the most, when you're the most sensitive or the most fragile is right after you take your Shahada. Because it feels like a 1,000-pound weight is off your shoulders and you feel amazing, like you want to run through the streets saying, I'm Muslim, but after that, you're kind of lost. I would have to, go to Google to figure out how to pray or finding different rulings. And then on top of that, born and raised in America, we're growing up with, the way Americans have grown up. There's alcohol, I'm a DJ, I'm in clubs 4 nights a week. And you guys are born Muslim, a lot of you. How many of you can go into a masjid and tell their mom, Mom, how do I stop drinking? So imagine us converts, how do we make this transition now? We know it's bad, and we know we want to get to that point, but the hardest part is, who do you talk to? And I had nobody to talk to. I kind of had to talk to Allah and say, Allah, guide me away from you. You guided me to Islam, help me away from all this bad stuff. And alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah happened. But I think right after we take our shahadas, when we need to, because side story, I go into the masjid, and if I tell them I'm a convert, they'll take me to the corner. Oh, brother, sit down, tell me, and they make dua for me like I have special powers. I don't have special powers, I need help from you. So, I mean, if you see a convert, help them out.
So very negative experiences, and I just kind of wanted to bring up, I mean, alhamdulillah, I don't think that I can remember I had any really seriously negative experiences with Muslims, like directly negative. But I think an issue that's an issue for all converts, I guess, is that even if there's not a specifically negative issue, it's not that Muslims are doing something bad, it's that they're not doing anything. Because it's really lonely as a new Muslim, especially in the beginning. And I think like the most like obvious time is like suhoor, like like waking up and it's like your whole family's asleep and you're like in the kitchen making noise and like eating like yogurt and like Cheerios or something for suhoor, and you're just like, oh, it's kind of dark out. I don't know. So I mean, although I'm sure a lot of people also have that same experience, but it has a much more of an effect on you as a revert. I mean, not even that it was such a negative thing, but it was you feel lonely, and everyone around you, your family and stuff, and your friends, and you don't have a Muslim. Most people don't have a Muslim community or a group of Muslims that they can even relate to. If you're raised in Islam, you have your family, at least that. There's more Muslims around you. There's someone who, okay, at least this person like has a similar like view of reality as me. But like at least for myself, like I felt like I was in the twilight zone half the time, because everyone sees the world very differently than I do, and it's troubling because then you're like, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. Why am I the only one who feels this way? How come nobody else agrees with me? So inshallah, I think I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but we really do need to create more resources for new Muslims. And even like you were saying about like going to the sheikh, like with drinking and stuff like that, like I think we talked about this in some of the other panels about the disconnect between like the scholars and the community, and how we need to have a better like communication with our imams and stuff. And we all know about that, but for reverts, I think, at least for myself, I kind of assumed that I was the only one who didn't I'm like, oh, these people are all Muslim. They all know exactly like who to go to and where to answer these questions, and I'm the only one who doesn't know what to go. So I'll just figure it out on my own because I don't want to bother anybody.
So